get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders, and I am excited. I am going to be introducing formally in a second Howard Ankin of AnkinLaw.com. And, Howard, I always like to mention past episodes people should check out of the podcast. And one of, related to, I think Howard, in my perception, knows all of the famous sports figures in Chicago. If you go on YouTube, you could see him with Andre Dawson, Ozzie Guillen, and Wilson Contreras, and numerous others. So one of the past episodes is with the founder of Big League Chew, and he talked about how he started it as a relief pitcher in the bullpen in the minor leagues, and how he did not want to chew chewing tobacco, so he invented this shredded gum that just caught on. And another one, some Chicago brands featured the founder of RX Bars that actually went on to sell to Kellogg and Immerman Angels and many, many more. Check them out on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We help you run your podcast. For me, Howard, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, and found no better way to do that than to profile the people and companies I most admire and feature them on the podcast and let everyone else know what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. You can email support@rise25.com. We've been doing it for over a decade now. And I am excited to introduce Howard Ankin, and big shout out and thank you to Rafi Arbel, who runs Market JD. This would not have happened without Rafi, and he helps law firms with everything from web design, content, SEO, strategy, and much more. I always say he's too smart for his own good. He's an attorney himself and got his MBA from the University of Chicago. So Howard Ankin is a third-generation lawyer, and even as a young boy, he accompanied his father to court on school breaks. So he's got some funny stories as a child, and Howard's going to share those. He owns Ankin Law, which was founded in 1997, alongside his father and partner, Paul Ankin, and the firm has extensive experience helping people with personal injury, workers' compensation, wrongful death, social security disability, criminal and civil litigation. They've represented over 25,000 clients and have had hundreds of millions in settlements and verdicts. And you can check them out at AnkinLaw.com. It's ANKIN law.com. Howard, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to hear a childhood story, right? You speak to, when I was watching videos online about you, you talk about this, your childhood and going to, the court as fun. So tell me some funny stories growing up as a child whose dad's a lawyer.
Well, I'm the firstborn son of firstborn grandsons from both sides of my family. So my mom's dad was a lawyer, and then my mom married a lawyer. So in my mom's world, if you were, I was only destined to be a lawyer. But anyway, so growing up, it was like, that was like I'm doing today what I thought I was going to be doing, which was being a lawyer. I interview people, I talk to people. People have all these great stories about like how they met a professor, or, something happened to them in their life, and then it geared them towards their law career. But for me, this is what I was always going to be doing. So I used to accompany my dad on, winter breaks, spring breaks, and used to go to court with him, carry the suitcase. My dad would like make up a little suitcase for me that would have like coloring books in it sometimes, just to like keep me busy. And I'd be like sitting back in the pews at the back of the courthouse, and I'd be like coloring or listening to stories. So yeah, it was really great. And so as I'd get up with my dad in the morning, and like sometimes we'd get in the car together and we'd drive downtown, and my dad would be talking to me about like whatever his day was that he had planned that day. And it wasn't like it was anything special. It was like, that was the day that I was off school, and that's what my dad had up on his calendar. That's what we did. But my dad was a sole practitioner, which is basically they don't really make lawyers like they make like my dad used to practice. Today, everybody has a specialty, and they just really are the best at one thing that they do. But my dad, he did everything. He understood a lot of different areas of law, and basically he represented people and families and whatever the broad varieties of what they needed. My dad did, and for a lot of those things, since he was doing consumer law, people didn't have money to pay. So a lot of my humorous stories that involved my dad was like how he made a living. So like I remember being a little kid, and I'm up in my room, and my room was at the towards the front of the street, and all of a sudden I'm hearing like motorcycles just roaring, just these roaring motorcycles burning, and I could hear the sound of the motorcycles revving from like blocks away. So all of a sudden the motorcycles, they kept getting closer and closer and closer, and I felt myself kind of like hiding underneath the bed. And the next thing
I would have hid.
I'm running downstairs to my dad, and I'm like, Dad, the mod squad is here. The mod squad's here. And he's like, don't worry about it, Howard. Those are my clients. And the whole street is lined up with like the motorcycle gang. And out walks like the head guy, and he's walking into like my parents' home with like a satchel. Okay. And I'm standing like hiding behind my dad. And out comes these like feet that my parents had bought like a dining room table. But when you sat on it, because like people had shag carpeting in those days, you like kind of hit your knee underneath the table. So my dad's client manufactured him these like little feet that they were putting on the end of the four sides of the table to like lift it up. Anyways, I guess it's not as funny as like that I made it, but as a childhood memory to know that like, you were nervous about like the mod squad coming. That was one of my stories of my dad.
I would be nervous as well.
Yeah.
What's a lesson you learned from your dad, whether it's in business or life?
My dad has a lot of lessons in life to be learned. One of the most part is like he is the most loyal when it comes to my mom. Probably the most best lesson he could ever teach anybody. But in terms of his clients, that is an equal loyalty. Just to this day, my dad is really retired. But if he has somebody that calls him and is like, I want to, I usually like people call, they talk to my dad, I'll advise them, I'll talk to him. But I still have people that call me today and they're like, I need to talk to your dad. He's my lawyer. And my dad, to his credit, he's like, I'm their lawyer, and he'll call them. And, my dad, I'll be talking to him, and he'll be like nervous about making sure that like the case comes out perfectly for them, like as if it's his own life. He needs to make sure that like the case worked out. And basically the concept that anything anybody needed, he was there to help. And today, that's really how we run our practice here. And that's how I run my practices. If somebody calls, we're here to help. Whatever I can do, if we can't handle it, we try to refer people to other people, whatever we can make happen for them. So anyways, there are not too many people that have that, like, I don't know, tenacity that my dad had, and make sure that if he was held responsible for helping you, he made sure you're helped.
What kind of personality do you have to have, Howard? I feel like people come to you and they're experiencing some kind of turmoil in their life, and you have to be, I don't know, somewhat empathetic. It seems like a tough job.
It's definitely a tough job. And I have to say to you, it's definitely been made harder post-COVID. It used to be working 15 hours a day, 6.5 days a week. That was just the life of a lawyer. And pretty much like when COVID came, it seems like all of society did like a reboot or rethought on, what it was to have a career or what it was to have a work-life balance. So even if you want to be in the office on a Saturday morning, you're not really finding anybody else on a Saturday morning in order to talk to or fix things or to make things happen. Those aren't the expectations. So law is definitely starting to be practiced in a different way now. But the same way, people have expectations of people that you're going to be available to help them 24/7, but yet the other way around, if you want to call them 24/7, this is really post-COVID, other people really aren't around 24/7. They want you to be around 24/7. And that's something that, as a society in general, we're as Americans, we're really going to have to figure out how that works.
How has that changed practicing law for you?
I don't know if it's for me that maybe it's the post-COVID, or maybe that, like my children are at the age where like they really need me, or for my purposes, maybe I'm at the point where, I have 70 something people helping me, or maybe I'm at the point where like I really know what I'm doing, or all those things in combination. But I used to be somebody that, you could have pulled up, the cot in my office because I was here working. And I did that for, this is my 25th year of, having Ankin law. And it's my 30th year being a lawyer. So pretty much for 25 years, that was my lifestyle, was around the clock working. I do have to say is, I'm probably working 10 or 15 hours a day now. But, like the concept that I'm not doing it at my office, but I may be doing it at home. I don't know, like the world changed as to how, law is practiced. And like the Zoom call that we're doing now, this was never done like this way before. So maybe it's opening up other avenues to allow people to have a work-life balance that was never had before. But it was dealing with like how law is practiced to how it was practiced even just 5 years ago, rolling with those changes and making sure that you're still providing great advocacy. That's what I'm contending with now.
Howard, when I look at you and your firm, I feel it's a masterclass on how do you build authority, a brand in a very competitive space and become top of an industry. So I'm wondering, how have you, when you think about you building your reputation and the brand, Ankin Law brand, what have you done over the years?
Historically, probably if it's now a generation ago, 2 generations ago, there's always people in any profession that are dialing it in. And there's always people that like, they'll give blood to make sure that like they're the best in their field. So part of what I've tried to do is tried to be a resource for the community that basically says, when you come here, you're taken care of. And now more than ever, because what's really proliferated in the marketplace is there's just a lot of people that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Like you can get involved in an auto accident and you might get, people that are calling you off of stolen police report information, offering you legal services. And I don't know who would accept legal services from somebody that's offering them services like that. But so what we try to do is make sure that people know what they're getting and know that we were here long before they had their case, and we will be here long after they have their case. I'm a 3rd-generation attorney, okay? And I practice that way. Like I have a reputation that I have to continue that was followed by my father and grandfather's great reputation for helping people. And so even today, a big part of what I do, I'm involved in a lot of bar association, virtually most every bar association that I deal with. I'm a board member, president, so on and so forth of these law boards. And they need my help because they need people. It's not just like what the law says, but the rules for how we practice as lawyers, how we hold ourselves up to the highest esteem as lawyers. We're trying to figure out, all these rules were written, for a world that wasn't an internet world, wasn't a pre or post-COVID world. So trying to make sure that people are getting the services that they expect, and that, lawyers and professionals are held to those high standards, even though it's modern technology world or a world where everybody wants a work-life balance. The public and clients, they still deserve to have people at their very best, and society still really deserves to have lawyers that are acting as their really best to make sure the law is how it should be for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you do a really good job of building your brand and authority. And one of the ways you'll collaborate with other, people that are recognizable in Chicago. When I look, did some research, I see you with Andre Dawson, I see you with Ozzie Guillen, I see you with Scott Besudnik. So I'm wondering, how do you, what's most beneficial to, and how you collaborate with some of the major figures in Chicago?
Well, it's like everything else. Let's say somebody wanted to have a podcast. Somebody would say, like, well, hey, you should call you, Jeremy, and Rise 25 is the place to go. Okay. And they know that they would get good service for that. Okay. So, like, if somebody said, I want to go to a dentist, I need an accountant, I need a lawyer, you would ask somebody and say, hey, who is somebody that would be somebody that could help me with this? Who's the best in the profession? And so, in our society, people really look up to our athletes. Like, we respect our athletes. And so I have done well with the local athletes of the Chicagoland, almost to the point where if you're an athlete in Chicago and you're not in a Howard Ankin commercial, you're not a popular athlete in the city of Chicago. But it wasn't always like that. Just like everything else in the building of my practice, I had to go out and I had to start with, like, the first athlete. And that first athlete needed to realize that when they were acting as a pitchman for me, and they said, look, Howard Ankin is where you go if you need help. And that these athletes weren't going to get egg on their face that Howard Ankin wasn't going to call them. Howard Ankin was going to talk to them. Howard Ankin wasn't going to do for them. Now, I'm not going to tell you that, we live in a society where there are some people with unreasonable expectations. And I'm not going to say that there's a couple people that if you went online and saw a review that I don't have some unfair character assassination. Okay. But I will tell you that, like, look, I'm a third generation lawyer and I bleed being a lawyer. And the athletes that are pitchmen for me, they bleed what they do for a living. And they recognize within me, that, like, instinct that I'm a home run hitter. And they just like me. They just do. And I like them. And so a lot of them, it starts out the first year where they're a pitchman. And the next thing they text me and they call me. And, it's like I got a camaraderie with them where I really appreciate the fact that they're helping me. And I really appreciate that we have we have a connection together.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned with the authority and the branding that you do. And I know there's a lot of favorites throughout the years. I mentioned some of my favorites because I'm a big baseball fan. So I remember Ozzie Guillen and the White Sox and Andre Dawson. But I know you did some work with Tim Anderson. So I'd love for you to talk about that for a second.
Well, Tim Anderson is just, there's certain people in this world that are just born with exceptional personalities and they're just exceptional human beings. And Tim Anderson, to me, he just emanates, like somebody that just wants to do his best in life. So he seems like he, is great on the field, and as great as he is on the field, he, at least for how I know him, he seems to be wanting to give back. And he basically is saying, like, look, I was hit in life with the lucky stick, and I feel a need to give back to the world, saying that I was given something and I'm going to give it back because I had this great opportunity. And that's really one of the reasons why I, really like him a lot. But there's others, like, the Vanderquigs, which are two professional basketball players that are married to each other here in Chicago. And they're doing exceptional things, on the court, and exceptional things for women's basketball and exceptional things for women in sports. And they were, recently one of them was named, top 50 greatest women's sports athletes of all time. And I just love being connected with them, that they're trying to do everything in life to give back to their sport and give back to the world also. So there's a lot of special people that are in sports, and I've been lucky to be able to, work with some of them.
One thing, Howard, I want to point people towards is your website, and for a couple of reasons. Obviously, if you have a need for whatever, for some of the services I mentioned, you can go to ankinlaw.com. But I think it also is really instructive. Just when you look at the site, to know someone's customer client, right? You hit the site, and I encourage anyone to go to ankinlaw.com, and you can follow along with me. But when you hit the site, you see immediately a picture of the person for that. You get that personal touch, and then you see get a free case. You see the Google ratings. And then you have, like, it's always not apparent on everyone's site that there's a number at the top right. There's get a free case review, get a free case review. There's start a chat. There's a blinking phone for someone to call. There's a lot of really good calls to action. It makes it easy for people to contact you, which sometimes gets lost on websites. And I'm wondering the thought process on the get a free case review. I mean, if I'm contacting someone, I'm wondering, how much is it going to cost? I mean, is this going to be expensive, or how is it going to work? How did you come up with, and the thought process of, the first thing that catches my eye is get a free case review?
So, there are other lawyers that advertise their legal services. I feel what sets me apart from a lot of my competitors or a lot of other people that may advertise nationally is I actually practice law. I talk to people every day. I'm at my desk every day. So I don't use the marketing of my practice to be a business. I use the marketing of my practice to basically say, please come to me. Now, I owe a debt of service and gratitude. I have about 70 people with me, and I want to make sure that the lawyers that are also with me, and my partners and associate lawyers, and also the support staff, I think I have the greatest staff of anybody. And I want to make sure that they're well compensated. And that's why we're always going out into the marketplace to say, please use our services. Now, for my purposes, one of my good friends from childhood, Rafi Arbel, he helps me with my website. And then another person that I didn't know from my childhood, but I feel like I've known them since my childhood, we've been working so long, is Eric Revels. And between the two of them, they're like, two bookends for me, where one helps with the marketing aspect of my office and the other one helps with the online marketing of my office. And the two of them coordinate together to really provide me the best advice that I can get on marketing my practice. And with both of them being able to advise me on that, and the three of us working together, that typically, I like coming to work on Friday mornings, because Friday mornings is typically my day for my marketing advertising work. But the other 5.5 days a week, I'm working, and I'm working on my cases and so on and so forth. So anyways, your compliment, about how somebody could easily find me and so on and so forth, that really goes to my dad, who, had the theory that everybody should be able to call him at any time and be able to reach him and get services with him. So in the days before cell phones and so on and so forth, my dad's clients not only had his work number, but they had our home number. So since the time I was about 7th, 8th grade, I was already picking up the phone, and some clients that I've had over the years and even have today, I've known since my childhood. And then at the same time, Rafi Arbel at Market JD, and then Eric Revels, who used to have his own private practice, who I influenced to come in-house with me. Wish Rafi would come in-house with me too, but he's too successful or doesn't want to. Eric was also very successful also. But those two guys come up with when you are able to pinpoint these certain things, that's both their brilliance. And I'm very lucky to have them. I'm lucky to have the brilliance of, my partners and lawyers here and support staff. They're also doing great things for great people as well as I am. I'm just here to help set that direction too.
Howard, I'd love to hear about from each of those. You mentioned Rafi, you mentioned Eric, and let's start with Rafi. What's when you think of advice you've gotten from him on the marketing side, what sticks out?
We want to make sure that we market for real. Okay. I guess that's how Rafi would put it to me. So years ago, Rafi and I started out when we were about 18 years old, and we were working, selling Cokes and peanuts and stuff at the ballparks. And that's where we met. But at that period of time, which seems like, 2 lifetimes ago, everybody that was working out at the ballparks, everybody was a hustler. They were all just trying to make their life better. And everybody that I meet that Rafi and I work with at that time, they're all successful in their individual fields. So years later, when Rafi was starting his own business, he came to me and said, "Hey, I'm doing this." And I knew who he was from, being friends with him from all those years. And I said, "Absolutely, we're going to start working together with this." And so, he just has a certain mind to be able to say, we need to do this better. But this is the advice that he gave me. He said, "Howard, I can't market you if you're truly not the best. You can't just say to me that you're the best. You have to show the world that you're best." And it was because of him that he's like, "You got to try cases. You need to be in the courtroom. You need to have your own caseload. You need to be the president of your law school's alumni association. You need to be on the board of your state bar association. You need to be a governor for the National Bar Association." Okay. And he's the one that has pushed me over these last 10 or 15 years to say, you need to be the one that's setting the agenda. You need to be the one that's doing it for people. And before people even hire me, I've already been advocating in Springfield. I've already been advocating in Washington, D.C. When somebody comes to me and say, "Why should I hire you?" I'm like, I've already been doing it for you. The law is the way that it is because I've already been doing what I've been doing long before you met me. And my reputation is just what you heard from your family or your friend that referred you to me about the great result that I got you from before. But anyways, there's great advice from my good buddy Rafi, who was like, "You need to be doing it better than anybody else." And he's still putting me to task. That's why I'm here with you today. He's like, "You have to be a thought leader. You need to be with Jeremy." And as you said, he's the one that made it happen. He did. And no less, by the way, I could be talking about my buddy Eric Revels, and he gives me the same advice and the same pushing on his side. And he equally, makes me come to work every day to be the best that I can possibly be.
I love that. Show people you're the best. I love that. What advice that sticks out from Eric?
Eric is just like brilliant in terms of his, marketing skills. And we sometimes go at it, he's very passionate about, his ideas and how things should be marketed. And I'm very passionate about like how things should be marketed too. And there's times where he thinks that he has a really great idea. And I'm like, that is a really great idea, but for the other guy. Okay. Because I want people to know that like when they market, like even with you talking to me, Jeremy, I think you get the idea. I'm not that lighthearted of a guy. Just ask my wife, Tracy. Okay. I'm serious about life and I'm serious about being a lawyer. And I want to make sure that when we're marketing to people, they understand that the marketing that I'm giving, I want there to be a certain level, okay, that the public sees when they see our marketing. And I'm always trying to make sure that like the marketing that we do to the public, it's never a down marketing. Okay. I want other lawyers that see my marketing. I don't want anybody coming up to me and being like, "Hey, Howard, hey, now, I don't think that looks good for us." Okay. And sometimes I see some marketing that's done by other people. Not that it's not ethical, not that it's not legal. It's a little bit on the low brow. I want to make sure that it's on the high brow. And that's why I want, if I'm in a picture, I want them to see athletes with us. Now, one of the things that Eric and I came up with is, when I was growing up, understanding a more difficult concept, like how does a bill become a law? So you would watch I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill, and you would see like a little bit of you see a commercial that basically took a hard concept and made it a little bit more easily in a cartoon fashion. Okay. And so we have a stickman device that, Eric and I came up with, but he continues to drill down on this stickman. And we try to take the hard concept of, hey, you've been injured, you have this legal case, this is something that's happening to you. And we try to boilerplate that down to basically be like, this is something that like from our, like a concept from our childhood, how we could take like a cartoon, but show people this is how we make it easy. And even though, a bill turning to law is far from easy, and helping somebody that's involved in a legal case is far from easy, but we try to like illustrate that like if you go to the right lawyer, we can make life a lot simpler and easier for you than if you handle it yourself, or you go with someone that doesn't have a certain amount of knowledge and experience as we do to be able to handle it.
Howard, I have one last question. Before I ask it, I just want to thank you for sharing your story, sharing your journey, and some of the things that worked for you throughout the years. And I want to encourage people to go to ankinlaw.com, check out more what they're working on there. You can check out more episodes of inspiredinsider.com and Rise 25. The last question I have, Howard, is when you think of some of your favorite books or resources, it could be business related, because you run, not only are a lawyer, you wear a lot of hats, right? Not only are you a lawyer, you serve cases, you have over 70 plus staff for your firm. There's a lot of moving parts here. So I'm curious of if you have what favorite resources, whether it's a book, a podcast, a video, something that people are like, I want to learn more and get inside the head of what Howard has learned. What are some of your favorites?
So, law is a profession. It's not a business. You're forever learning, and I'm forever trying to read various things or to add on to my knowledge. I'm always trying to talk to people like you, Jeremy, to understand like what other people are doing and understand how to, make things better. And I hope when people talk to me, they learn something from me also. So I read, there's a lot of like, you go to the self-help section, like either online or at the bookstore, and there's always like some famous books about what people do. I try to read all those books. I try to read everything that's about law or about the new cases that are coming down and what's happening with that. And I keep trying to keep myself apprised. Generally, like one of the things that I like to do at night, I'll just sit with my iPad before I go to sleep and I'll just read, as much as I could read about current events or anything that I could read about to be updated. But I will say there are probably two things that stand out to me as far as like anything that I've ever read. Without getting into a specific author or a specific book or anything like that, because I don't know what you're allowed to say or not say with this.
You could say a specific book.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, there's.
I have like 5 credits on my Audible, Howard. So if you give me some specific books, that'll be good.
All right. There's one book that people read, and it's basically a book about like how people become successful. And it's like you read every single chapter about like what makes people success. And one chapter says like if your birthday's in January versus a birthday later in month, people that have January birthdays because they're oldest in their year, they might be more successful than others. Okay. But anyways, so like sometimes when you do reading things may not be something new. Sometimes you read things that reinforces something that you may already think. But anyways, one of those things from that book is there's something that's called the 10,000 hour rule. And it basically says that if you want to be successful in something or you want to be the best at something, you got to get 10,000 hours in order to be able to do it. And that's one of the reasons why I feel that I'm highly successful and as an attorney in helping people is my 10,000 hours in, I was getting that in my childhood. I was getting that in by the time I was in high school. My dad was a sole practitioner. If they couldn't reach my dad at home, at work, they reached him at home. I was taking messages. When my dad walked through that door at 7:00 at night, in order for my family to sit down at dinner, I'd meet him at the front door and I'd be giving him the list. Like I was his legal secretary. Okay. Or legal assistant. So what I'm saying is I really subscribe to the 10,000 hour rule. And if I have people that come work with me, I just basically say, look, I could teach you as much as I can teach you. But if you don't want to be here, if you don't want to work, if you don't want to get into it, you'll be successful, but it's going to drag out the timeline for how long it takes you to become successful. And I tell everybody, whether it's their golf swing, okay, or whatever they want to be doing, you got to put your time in or you're just not going to get there. And then my other favorite one is there's somebody else that basically says, you got to get the best people that you can get to be working with you, and then get everybody and you got to get everybody working with you that you can, that's the best, and get everybody on the bus. And then once you get the best people on the bus, then you could figure out what seat they need to be sitting in. And in terms of, my law practice or working with people that I work with, I'm all the time trying to work with the best possible people that I could work with, and then figure out what's the best possible seat for them to be seated in as far as being able to move forward. And especially at a time like now, coming out post-COVID, a world where everybody's trying to figure out how to have a work-life balance, working with the best people and figuring out what the best seat that they should be in, I think that rule is more important than ever.
Howard, I love both those books. So, I think the 10,000 hour rule or law, whatever it's called, is in several books, but the one that sticks out is Malcolm Gladwell Outliers. I think that's the one you're referring to. Is a fantastic book. And then the Good to Great by Jim Collins really talks about like what you're talking about. So both those books I love. So thank you for sharing those. Everyone can check those out, and just check out ankinlaw.com and more episodes. So Howard, thanks so much. Thanks everyone.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.